Thank you very much, Mr. President and members of the school board. It's an honor to be with you tonight to share with you an overview of the report that Governor Doyle and I commissioned. And I want to begin by thanking Governor Doyle and his representative who is here tonight, Mike Morgan, who is the Secretary of the Department of Administration, for their participation in this. I also would like to thank those foundations, those local foundations, who helped provide the funding for this report. And finally, I want to thank not only the superintendent, but the members of the Milwaukee Public Schools, the Department of Public Instruction, some of you who worked with and cooperated with the individuals who put this report together. Just as a background here, and I think probably it'd be better to have a conversation about this, but to give you a background as to how this came about, I think it's fair to say that there are a number of people in the community who are concerned about the Milwaukee Public Schools and the future of the Milwaukee Public Schools in a number of areas. In particular, I think all of us share the underlying concern that our number one priority is how we have good academic outcomes for the young people who attend the Milwaukee Public Schools. That is, at the end of the day, and at the beginning of the day, hopefully what we're all concerned about, and that is what are the academic outcomes? How do our children do so that they can get the education they need to get jobs and ultimately to support families and to support the economy of this area. There's also concern, and I certainly share this, and it's not just with the Milwaukee Public Schools. It is something we face in city government, and as we can see this week in state government and all levels of government, about the financial underpinnings of the government itself. And that is the starting point as to where we're going to go and what the future is going to hold. We're all familiar with what has happened over the last X number of years as it pertains to the Milwaukee Public Schools and the property tax bill. And one of the concerns I've had is that I do not believe that it is sustainable to continue to have double-digit increases in the property tax for any year to go. And that is something that I think, again, most of us, maybe not all of us, but most of us agree on. I can remember last year when this issue came up and the superintendent wrote a letter to the common council members, and from his standpoint, he said that looking into the future, that the issues that are the options that were before you as policymakers and this community were really threefold. One, given the financial situation of the school district, we could continue to see large increases in the property taxes. The second option was dramatic cuts in programs, educational programs in particular. And the third was a lawsuit against the state that would hopefully create more funding for the Milwaukee Public Schools. My view is, with regard to the last of those three options, if that were the route we were going to take, and I'm not foreclosing that, and I know that you haven't foreclosed that, I see that as a many, many year process, which is in effect a roll of the dice, and maybe not a particularly good roll of the dice. And it was at that point where I thought, well, that means there's two other options. One is dramatic cuts in programming for the Milwaukee Public Schools, or these large property taxes increases. That was sort of the genesis of why I felt that it was necessary for us to start looking at the financial underpinnings of the district. And in my mind, I've always had two silos. One is the academic performance silo, and the other is the financial silo of the district. And they are different silos, but they do intersect in some regards. And so I started talking to some foundations, and then started having conversations with the governor, who very quickly decided that it would make sense for us to do this together. So we commissioned a group to do this last fall. We have before us the report itself, and you all have a copy of the report. And there's really two major portions to the report. The first portion is the portion that lays out the problem and identifies the problem really in a number of different causes. First is the issue of declining enrollments, something we're all familiar with and we've experienced over many years in the district. And it projects that we're going to continue to have declining enrollment, although not at the pace we've had in the recent past. But the declining enrollments create one of the major issues, one of the financial stresses that we have on this district. The second is increased expenses. And it points to both expenses for current employees and for retirees, for example, as items of concern in the next 4 to 5 years. The third issue, and one that we're all familiar with, is the funding of the school choice program and the impact that that has had on the taxpayers and the Milwaukee Public Schools. From there, and to me that is the most important part of this report, that there will be disagreement in this room, there will be disagreement in the community, there will be disagreement among individuals on this board as to how to address some of the recommendations or options, is a better word. These are options that have been put forth. And there'll be a lot of discussion, and there has been a lot of discussion about that. But what my hope is that this report will galvanize this community to understand the depth of this problem, that this is a very serious problem. Now, in saying that, I am mindful of the fact that you have always balanced your budgets, at least in the foreseeable past. I haven't gone back 20 or 30 years. But this is not a situation, and this is what the analysis showed, this is not a situation like we see in some communities where the school district runs huge deficits. That has not happened. But the storm clouds, as I described them, are 4 to 5 years out. And it's my hope that regardless of what the disagreement is, that there is a meeting of the minds, that this is a very, very real prospect and a very, very serious problem. If we have that understanding as a starting point, I think then it allows us, whether it's with the state, whether it's with the federal government, whether it's locally here, to start to craft some solutions. Now, once you get beyond that part of the report, you get to the second part of the report, and I just want to take a minute and talk about what we focused on. This is not an analysis of the educational spending that is done by the district. This is an analysis of the non-educational components of the school district. The intent of this was to get a handle on what the district is spending and where the money's coming from, particularly as it relates, again, to the non-instructional portion of the Milwaukee Public Schools. It lays out a number of options as to where money can be saved. And again, some of those I'm sure we'll talk about later on. But the part that concerns me the most is, even if we did everything here, and I think we all recognize it's not going to happen, that everything here is going to be implemented, we still have some serious issues fiscally, 4 to 5 years. Again, my goal, and I'm speaking personally, and Mr. Morgan can speak for the governor, my goal is to try to get resources into the classroom so that we can educate the young people in this community. And that to me is the overriding mission of the Milwaukee Public Schools, is how do we get the resources into the classroom. So having said that, again, I will be happy later to run through some of the recommendations if you want. I'm assuming most, if not all of you, have read that and there'll be questions about that. So now I'd like to turn over to Mr. Morgan. Again, I want to thank him personally. He's been very involved in this personally, and given the job he has, particularly right now with the economic stress that the state is under with its budget projections, the fact that he has been willing to come here, I think underscores both his personal commitment to this issue as well as Governor Doyle's personal commitment to this issue.